welcome to the InnoGuide podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. I'm your host, Bob Boudelier. This podcast, my website, my newsletter, and my community are focused on helping you discover the secrets of innovation in the age of AI. Since I don't rely on paid ads, I want to thank customers who bring me onto their programs as a technical product accelerator, working alongside their teams to help them develop products smarter and faster without adding risk, while bringing human-centered AI skills into their organizations. You can learn more at www.innoguide.net. In this episode number 97, we'll be sharing The Frame, Unspoken Laws of Power, Status, and Influence by Justin Michael and Jonny Staker. I've watched technically sharp leaders lose the room to someone half their depth. Not once, but over and over again. The deal goes to the wrong person, the board leans toward the wrong voice, the program follows the wrong lead. It's not expertise that decided it, it's the frame. This is a term that was unfamiliar to me before reading this book. The frame is the unspoken power structure that determines who gets followed before anyone opens their mouth. Jonny Michael and Jonny Staker spent years mapping the laws behind it. What they found is in the frame, and that's what we're getting into today. So let's get started. The book opens with this story. It was late spring 2014. I was sitting 3 tables deep at Café de Flore, nursing a cold espresso, preparing for the most important meeting of my career. I had everything, the product, the story, the numbers. I was ready, or so I thought. Then she arrived. She didn't ask for permission, didn't scan the room for hierarchy. She claimed the best table on the patio, the one that's never available, and opened a leather journal with a steel pen. When she clicked it, the entire cafe paused. The waiter, who'd ignored me for 20 minutes, appeared instantly at her side. I watched her with cruel clarity. She wasn't performing, wasn't auditioning. Her entire presence said, "This is who I am, complete. Choose me or don't." I realized I had been doing the opposite. I was impressive, polished, strategic, but beneath the lacquer, I was bleeding need, waiting to be picked. That's when I understood, the instant you angle to win, the loss is already seated. The next morning, I walked into La Défense with nothing. No slides, no pitch, just a gunmetal pen and silence. I set that pen on the table, one decisive press. Click. "No pitch," I said. "If it's a fit, we'll know." They leaned forward. The CFO smiled. "Now you have my attention," he said. It wasn't what I said. It was that they felt something, a gravity, a stillness, and recognized I wasn't performing for their approval. I had already chosen myself. Here's what I learned. You don't get what you argue, you get what you signal. And the strongest signal is this: I want nothing from you. Neediness is a fissure in your composure, a scent that precedes your words. It's why perfect products don't sell, why dates disappear despite chemistry, why interviews cool after your best answer. The moment you chase, you lose. The brain trusts what's inevitable, not what's argued. Signal lands before logic can resist. Struggle fails because it argues with the wrong part of the mind entirely. Years later, I saw this law again on a terrace above Lisbon. A woman standing at the railing with such composed presence that the entire room recalibrated around her. I didn't approach, didn't chase. I ordered with deliberate ease and let the silence thicken. She turned. In that moment, I finally saw it, unmasked. Attraction obeys the same law as power. The discipline to remain unmoved until the other moves first. Signal over struggle, presence over proof. This is the first law, non-neediness. Stop pitching and start radiating. Master stillness, speak without need. Hold through the silence. When you finally stand still, the world moves toward you, not because you chased, but because you became the force they can't escape. How about strategy? Strategy isn't about doing more. It's about choosing what not to do. And that single principle will restructure everything you think you know about power. This story takes us to a rooftop bar 60 floors up on Pine Street in New York in October. The air is sharp, the city moves below like it's performing for an audience that isn't watching. He was there to pitch a Series C founder, someone who'd spent 10 years in the trenches, self-funded, 8 figures, answering to no one. He arrived like every major decision had already been made a decade ago. No menu, no hesitation, just 2 words, old-fashioned. Real status doesn't advertise. It lives in the absence of hunger, and that void pulls people in. I reached for my laptop to show him my deck. He lifted a hand, small, deliberate, nothing forced. Don't show me anything yet. I read your stuff. What I don't know is why it's relevant to me. In one breath, I'd shifted from pitching to being evaluated, and I realized my mistake. I walked in trying to be chosen. So I didn't present. I said, no deck. If this fits both ways, we'll feel it. He smiled, not polite, but the recognition smile exchanged by 2 people who speak the same language without translation. 30 minutes later, there was no proposal, no procurement process, just a number, a handshake, and wire instructions, $100,000. It wasn't a sale, it was an alignment. This is what strategy at its highest form looks like. It isn't a move you make, it's a stake you inhabit. Real strategy doesn't persuade, it selects. And when you fail to filter, you forfeit everything you knew was on the table. I watched a 7-figure deal vanish in less than a heartbeat, not because the offer wasn't good, but because I pitched before I framed. In that instant, I recalibrated from peer to peddler. The frame flipped, and it never flipped back. Talleyrand moved through the upheaval of France, outlasting kings and revolutions, by giving little and filtering ruthlessly. He sat in silence while others revealed their urgency. Value waits, need rushes. The second you need the yes, the frame is gone. Here's what I want you to understand, he says. The real ones don't close, they qualify. They don't show up to persuade, they show up to evaluate. They don't optimize for conversion, they select for resonance. Stop asking what to say. Start asking what you signal before you speak. Refine your breath, your pacing, your silences. Curate from discipline, not fear. Detach from knowing your energy is worth more than any yes. When you master a strategic frame, you don't win the room. You walk in, and the world adjusts to you. Silence is king. And there's a silence where real money moves. Not emptiness, but density, air held like a predator's breath. You feel it before you hear it. That silence doesn't merely exist. It evaluates you. It decides if you stay. He learned it the morning he walked into the Mercer building in London. The lobby was stone and shadow. The receptionist tapping a rhythm older than courtesy. She'd seen a parade of sellers with pitched voices and stretched smiles, all overperforming, all stopped. I carried no pitch, no appointment, just a name, William Mercer, a man who didn't take meetings because he made them unnecessary. Most are taught to wait for permission, to email, to apologize for showing up, but I'd buried that habit years earlier after watching a deal close without me while I waited for an introduction that never came. I'd learned the cold truth. The only way to be taken seriously is to take yourself seriously first. No one invites the storm, it just arrives. I didn't ask to be let in. I said, he'll want to see me. Not arrogance, alignment. I wasn't there to earn the meeting. I was there because I belonged in it. 3 minutes later, Mercer stepped out of the private elevator like a verdict. Steel gray hair, eyes of withheld judgment. He didn't smile when he recognized me. He didn't nod. He simply said, right up with me. That turn was the permission. We rode in silence to the top floor. He didn't test me with questions. He tested me with absence. When he finally spoke, it was to tell me what we were going to do. 3 weeks later, $250,000 landed in my account. I didn't close him, I didn't convince him, and I arrived cold. History echoes the same truth. On the eve of Austerlitz, Napoleon abandoned the heights, appearing to retreat. His enemies rushed forward, blind to the trap. His restraint lured them into overreach. At dawn he struck. Cold was not weakness, but command disguised as stillness. Most misunderstand cold. They think it's a hack, a technique, a style, but cold isn't method, it's command. The refusal to be previewed or pre-approved. It works because the human brain is enslaved to novelty. An unexpected arrival bypasses logic and rewrites rankings instantly. We live in an era obsessed with introductions, warm handoffs, LinkedIn preambles. But power doesn't travel by referral. Power appears in such a way that not including it feels like a mistake. Cold is not cruelty, it's sovereignty. It makes them wire money. It makes her look up. It makes your name remembered long after the meeting has ended. When you arrive cold, the weather changes, and the world remembers because you were there. So here's a silent weapon he discusses in the book. He says high-status people don't try to be heard. They make others listen. He learned this lesson the hard way inside the High Court of Justice on the Strand. His CFO sat in a tailored suit, immaculate and meticulous, the kind of executive who made investors breathe easier just by entering a room. But beneath the polish was rot. He'd hidden fraud in the folds of complexity, bought a speedboat with stolen trust. We cut him quietly. No scene, just removal. An aggressive brain tumor unfortunately took him months later. The speedboat went to auction. And I understood, status is not what you show, it's what you withhold. That lesson was tested in a Mayfair boardroom, where 5 consultants pitched for a multi-million-pound retainer. One by one, they leaned forward with polished slides and modulated voices. Impressive, desperate. You could smell the trying. Then she walked in. No laptop, no pitch. Just leather folder and a walk that didn't rush or justify itself. She sat in the middle of the table and slid the folder down with a soft thud that landed like a gavel. Room rearranged itself without her speaking a word. He watched this pattern repeat across continents. In Milan, a woman in silk, unadorned, no phone, stood while men orbited with offers she didn't take. When a younger man tried to impress her, she simply said, "I rarely am," and closed the door without a sound. That precision followed me into every room where presence mattered more than words. At Bellman's Bar in New York, a hedge fund titan told me he'd heard every pitch. I smiled and said, "You'll find out if it's worth knowing." No defense, no persuasion, just inevitability. In Tokyo, a $500 million CEO stood alone at a penthouse bar. I took his glass and tasted it. Not bad, needs smoke. He laughed, not because the line was clever, but because someone finally moved through his frame without asking for favor. But here's what I also learned, he says. Not every silence carries weight. In Madrid, I leaned too far into detachment. A woman waited for me to lead, and instead I sat back, thinking absence alone would hold her. It didn't. She finished her drink and left before dessert. That was vacancy, not power. The difference is intent. Real high-status people don't need approval because they've already decided what they want. They walk into rooms as if they've already left. They ask challenging questions that let the silence expand. They exit first, always cleanly. This isn't arrogance, it's certainty, and certainty bends rooms without a word. So let's talk about the silent close. This will change how you sell, how you love, and how you move through the world. And it starts with silence. Most people confuse words with power. They fill every gap, defend every position, pile on slides and features and clever lines. They mistake noise for signal, and they lose. He learned this in Madrid, 9 floors above Gran Via, sitting across from a man who didn't greet him. He scanned him with his eyes, applying the oldest tactic in human power. Let the hush do the hunting. When he finally spoke, it was one word. Speak. I didn't, not from hesitation, but from signal. One sentence followed. You already know why I'm here. No pitch deck, no arsenal deployed, just contained calm. By morning, $300,000 landed in my account. No contract, no recap, just a silent transfer of trust between 2 people fluent in the same language, the language beneath words. Then there was Prague, a train cutting through frost-blurred hills and a woman whose presence dissolved everyone else into the background. Later in the dining car, I did what most people do. I spoke. I kept speaking. Words tumbled over themselves, trying to stitch a bridge. Halfway through, she set her fork down and asked, "Do you always talk this much when you're nervous?" I realized I'd been bleeding the close through the noise, mistaking performance for presence. So I stopped. I matched her silence, and in that shared stillness, something shifted. She looked back, softer now, and said, "Better." Then there was New York, a 42nd floor boardroom with 5 decision makers. He sat for 30 minutes saying nothing. When they asked him to convince them, he didn't move. He didn't blink. He let the air thicken until the imbalance became his. Then said, "If you're still evaluating, this is the wrong conversation." The CEO leaned forward. "We're not evaluating. We're ready." The contract was signed before he left. Here's what he learned, though. Most people fear silence in sales. They confuse words with value and volume with persuasion. But the highest status operators do the opposite. They don't broadcast. They send current. Think of the conversations you never forgot. You don't remember every word. You remember how they made you feel, the weight of the moment, the certainty of the air. We live in a time of signal fatigue. Everything is loud. That's why silence is now the rarest luxury good. The quietest person in the room holds the most power. When you cut your pitch to 5 words, then 3, then 1, when you lower your tone until it feels unnatural, when you still your body until a single movement carries weight, something shifts. You stop chasing, and the room bends. Signal is what remains when the words fall away. The book then dives into one of the most underestimated moments in any high-stakes interaction, the very first 5 seconds. And he means it literally. Not the first 5 minutes, not the opening pitch, but those initial beats where the frame gets set and authority gets decided before you even open your mouth. He takes us to San Francisco, 101 California Street. 2 founders sat waiting, one tapping his pen, the other checking his watch. I wasn't their first choice. I was the fallback. But I didn't arrive like one. No slide deck, no monologue. I walked in with a black notebook and sat down without explanation. When one founder asked who I was, I didn't answer his question. Instead, I let 3 seconds pass, opened his notebook without writing, and said, "I don't need the backstory. I already know the model." The pen stopped tapping. The room shifted. That's framing. Frame isn't presentation. It's the invisible social contract beneath the conversation. It decides who leads and who follows. The moment you enter a room, people are scanning for it instantly and ruthlessly. Who's qualifying whom? Who bends? He tested this everywhere. In Manhattan with a billion-dollar CEO who swirled his drink without looking up. He matched his pace and let the silence settle. In Tokyo, where a president said nothing for 20 minutes and made the stillness itself the frame. And in Lisbon, where he answered a direct question with, "That depends entirely on who's asking," making his curiosity worth more than my credentials. Science backs this up. Your amygdala decides in under 3 seconds, threat, prize, or ghost. Once that primitive verdict lands, logic arrives too late. Silence becomes dopamine. Calm breathing triggers mirror neurons. Your collected presence reprograms their nervous system before rational thought even enters the room. He watched a founder enter a Series B pitch with nothing but water and 30 seconds of silence. He closed $5 million in 20 minutes. Another rep came in with flawless charts and lost everything. The difference wasn't content. It was whether they triggered curiosity or cortisol. Here's the mechanical breakdown. Signal before speech. Act like the prize, not the applicant. Break the script they expect. Ditch pleasantries, but keep poise. Command with composure, not explanation. The highest status players don't chase, they hold. They create space and let others step into it. Once your presence speaks louder than your pitch, you're no longer selling. You're being selected. The ultimate test, then, isn't what you say, it's what time does around you. When your silence bends the tempo of the room, when an opening moment in your presence feels extended in theirs, that's when you know you hold the frame. Own the first 5 seconds, and the rest of the room is already yours. Then he speaks of the qualifier's edge. He says, "I want you to understand something right from the start. The sharpest doors don't slam. They whisper shut. No sound, no warning, simply gone. That is the qualifier's edge, knowing exactly when the door has closed and having the will to never open it again." He says, "I don't chase, I choose." Let me paint you a picture. A walnut-lined restaurant in Lisbon. Mosaics holding centuries of secrets on the walls. 2 of them sat at a table meant for 10. She was Cambridge forged, a surgeon's precision in every motion. When she locked eyes on mine, the air thickened, not because she was performing, but because she was certain. "What would make you walk tonight?" she asked. That question changed everything. Real persuasion doesn't chase, it qualifies. Most people get this fundamentally wrong. Power doesn't come from proof. It comes from not needing it. It's not a tactic, it's posture. The bowerbird builds his elaborate court not for every mate that passes, but to filter the few that match his pattern. The ones who choose are the ones chosen. He learned this the hard way. Deals unravel because he overreached, but the market kept showing him the same truth. The ones who need the deal rarely get it. Fast forward to Miami, a 42nd floor office. 6 vendors waiting outside with decks thick enough to stop a bullet. He walks in with one black folder, no slides, no pitch. He says this, "Before I tell you anything, why did you even take this meeting?" 20 minutes later, the founder walked him out himself. "Send the contract," he said. "No need to negotiate." He felt the fit long before the questions ended. Here's the neuroscience underneath. When you qualify others instead of performing for them, you're changing chemistry. Your stillness elevates your certainty. Your body secretes the signal of status. The person across from you feels the inverse, a subtle drop that pulls them to explain, to close the gap, to prove. But there's a breaking point. I once let my posture slip on a 7-figure deal. When their CFO raised an eyebrow at our price, I launched into a justification, he says. Numbers, comparisons, projections. Each world felt like sweat bleeding into the room. By the end, I'd already lost. Once you defend, you've lost. The pattern is simple. Hold stillness until they reveal something. Ask questions that test for alignment. And then make sure the door opens only one way. When they feel that truth, when they realize you'll walk without flinching, they don't reject you. They'll ask if they qualify. The world doesn't bend to the loudest pitch. It answers the quietest filter. Silence is the sharpest yes. What about the 51-49 rule? This segment is about energy, specifically the energy debt that forms whenever you invest more in something than the other person does. And the cure for that debt is something he calls the 51-49 rule. He starts with Dubai. He was on the 42nd floor of the Emirates Towers, the city shimmering below like molten glass, he says. This was the final stop in a 5-day gauntlet across Lisbon, New York, Madrid, and Dubai. 72 hours earlier, he had delivered a $5 million proposal, every word sharpened, every clause honed to an edge. Then came silence. No clarifications, no pleasantries, nothing. His team began to unravel. The VP of sales hovered at his door. Drafts of desperate follow-up emails appeared in his inbox. But I read them and said nothing, he said. Stillness is an X-ray. The moment you rush to fill it, every fracture shows. 3 hours later, the text arrived. Are we too late? We want to move forward. I waited 18 hours before replying. I told them we'd revisit next week. I needed to reshuffle priorities. Their answer came instantly. Please don't. We'll wire the money today. This wasn't new. I'd learned the same lesson years earlier in Paris with a woman who would resurface in Berlin. After 2 perfect nights, she went silent. My instinct was to bridge the gap, to reassure, to chase. Instead, I did nothing. 10 days of nothing. When she finally messaged me, her words weren't casual. They were an admission. I can't stop thinking about how you didn't chase. Most men always push harder. That's the equation. The side that holds back controls the pace. The problem I see constantly is energy debt, asymmetry. The moment you invest more than they do, value tilts and gravity shifts against you. He once watched a division head blow a $30 million deal by sending 3 unsolicited proposals and 2 unnecessary check-in calls. The bank stopped replying. Their reason? We just didn't feel the fit anymore. It wasn't about fit. It was about energy debt. The 51-49 rule is the antidote. 51 is interest, 49 is sovereignty. You maintain the majority of the energy, letting them reach for the remainder. Uncertainty triggers dopamine. Scarcity activates desire. When you're always available, you're rarely respected. Look at history. Talleyrand would slip from negotiating tables without warning, leaving emissaries in restless silence. Elizabeth I held suitors at bay for years through sheer restraint. She did less, not more, and commanded everything. In practice, that means cutting calls before the peak flattens and ending meetings while they still want more. When a founder he coached cut her pitch by 60% and laced the gaps with silence, a VC leaned in and whispered, "There's something about your confidence, I'm in. The paradox is this: absence builds intimacy faster than access. The space you leave forces them to step in, and that's when they truly choose you. The most magnetic person in any room is the one who doesn't need to be there. Those meant to rise with you will feel it, they will recognize the signal, and they will follow. Indirection is the key to seduction. Directness kills it. This segment is about one of the most misunderstood forces in human connection, and it applies whether you're closing a deal, building attraction, or leading people. It's called frame, and it works through tension, not tactics. He takes us to Barcelona first, a rooftop overlooking the Gothic Quarter, the sea shimmering below. A woman arrives, and the entire atmosphere shifts without her saying a word. She orders a Negroni. Her eyes sweep the horizon like she's claiming it. She looks everywhere but at me. Attention, I realized, is currency, and mine had yet to be earned. 4 days earlier, I'd messaged her exactly this. You look like someone who's hard to impress. I don't audition. No clever opener, no bait. She replied in 30 seconds. That night, we didn't trade resumes. We built something else. An architecture of glances, shifts in tempo, micro withdrawals that created contrast. When she asked what my angle was, I didn't throw a hook. I set a mirror. If I had one, you'd already be bored. One opening for access, stillness for presence, a slow retreat to pull back. The entire arc in under 60 seconds. This isn't manipulation, it's gravity. Fast forward to London. He's in a suite at the Corinthia with 2 partners controlling $500 million in capital. Again, no deck, no pitch, just surgical questions. Every time they steered toward what can you do for us, I redirected, making them justify why it was worth my time. 40 minutes in, one leaned back and said, feels like we're the ones pitching you. They then asked for terms before I'd offered anything. Here's the neuroscience. Your brain lights up when reward is uncertain. Dopamine surges on maybe. The Zeigarnik effect. Open loops pull attention until they close. A clean line like, this may not be for you, then silence. The mind chases the missing piece. That's not a funnel. That's gravity. People feel loss more strongly than gain. That's why indirection works. A funnel promises benefits and feels safe, so the mind discounts it. A frame hints at what could be lost, your attention, your presence, your choice. The body leans forward. High-status humans don't follow scripts. They follow signal. They sense the calm of someone who will not be hurried. And in that presence, they lean forward because no one likes being sold, but everyone loves feeling chosen. Drop the slides, burn the scripts, play with pulse, breath, and silence. Build your frame so solid so they feel it before you speak. You don't need to ask for attention when you are the signal. Closing happens on its own when the pull is already set. In chaos, there is fertility. That's Anais Nin's observation, and it's become the operating principle of everything he's about to share with us. Picture Canary Wharf 2015. He's 28 years old, corner office overlooking the Thames. One of the largest private equity firms in America is buying his company. 6 months of due diligence, clean terms, everything locked in. Then a black helicopter crests the skyline. Bart steps out. Billion-dollar operator whose reputation moves through boardrooms like an untraceable wire transfer. Fast, silent, final. He walks past my hand, past any greeting, and sits directly in my chair. This is theater. This is dominance. This is the opening move of someone sent to make leverage vanish. Every instinct tells him to fill the silence, reestablish connection, defend his ground. But here's what I learned that morning. Filling the air is an admission. It says that their silence has weight and yours does not. So I held still. When Bart finally spoke, it wasn't about synergy, it was about blood. $3.1 million in obsolete inventory coming off the purchase price. His CFO snapped open a laptop, spreadsheets already positioned to swarm. I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed on Bart. He can put the laptop away, I said. If you're going to play these games, we call time on the deal right now. That line wasn't rehearsed, it just arrived as instinct. Something behind his eyes gave way. The balance shifted. His jaw tightened. He tried to recover. I have to take a concession back to the board, but I held the ground. You're not getting one. We have a deal, and I'm happy with it. They were gone in 10 minutes. The price stayed untouched. The terms stayed intact. It wasn't about valuation. It was about presence. I've spent years studying that moment frame by frame, he says. By not standing to greet him, I told the room I didn't need his approval. When he took my chair, I didn't protest, not because I was submitting, but because I was containing the space. That 10-second silence, in a high-stakes room, it's an eternity. I watched his micro-shifts, the twitch in his jaw, the shallow breathing, the tightening around his eyes. That's when I knew. The pattern held everywhere: Paris, Manhattan, Hong Kong, Dubai. Founders who closed deals by dropping their slides. Magnates who backed down when met with silence. Investors who signed when I said, maybe we're not the right partner. Here's the law. The frame was never theirs to take. It was only yours to forget. The instant you stop chasing, they remember why they were following you. Stillness bends the room. Silence restores authority. In chaos, there's fertility, fertile ground of composure, unshakable ease, of the throne that was always yours. In this section, he opens with this quote, "The strongest love is love that can demonstrate its fragility." He then tells us about a meeting in Geneva that changed how he understands power, trust, and why the biggest deals in business rarely happen the way you think they do. Four Seasons Lounge was engineered for secrets, winter air sharp enough to taste, Lake Geneva black beyond the windows, and he was already there when I arrived. Navy cashmere, silver hair, a presence that made the room adjust to him. No handshake, just a nod. He'd flown in from England for this meeting and nothing else. He told me my name had been circling his world for months, and he wanted to see if the myth was real. I didn't pitch. I didn't smile. I sat. I matched his pace. I let silence hang until it had its own gravity. "I've worked with the best coaches on the planet," he said. 10 consultants this quarter. Why should I trust you?" "Maybe you shouldn't. That's your call." Something shifted between us in that moment. His eyes stopped scanning for weakness and started sizing potential. When prediction fails, authority walks through the seam. 15 minutes later, he pulled out a Mont Blanc checkbook. "What's the number?" I told him 100,000. He didn't blink. No contract, no proposal. When the wire landed, it came from Yorkshire money, old money, the kind that never flinches. And that's the whale frame. Here's what most people miss. He'd been watching for months, reading posts, hearing whispers, testing my presence from a distance. When he finally moved, it wasn't because of a pitch. It was because inevitability had already been built around me. Trust is chemical. When a person feels seen and safe, the brain releases oxytocin, the same neurochemical that bonds mother to child. It dissolves suspicion and creates conditions for commitment. Whales don't move on logic. They rationalize what their nervous system already chose. They're scanning for one thing. Do you trigger oxytocin or cortisol? Do they feel safe wiring 6 figures to someone without a contract? The answer doesn't come from your pitch. It comes from your presence. The rarest closers project inevitability so clearly that the brain relaxes. Whales buy energy, frame energy, the kind that can't be faked. Your frame isn't given. It's proven through consistent stillness. And here's the brutal truth. The highest caliber clients are scanning for fracture. They notice if your breath quickens when challenged. They know instantly who will bend and who won't. That's why economy of motion matters. Silence is a filter. The loudest thing you can say is sometimes nothing at all. Need is gravity's opposite. The one who carries the least need bends the orbit of everyone else. Whales are tired. They live in a downpour of pitches and performance theater. What they're starved for is signal, not volume, not theatrics. The rarest signal in the market is the person who needs nothing but stands for everything. Your work? Train stillness. Practice unavailability. Make calm your most expensive asset. Filter without apology. Because when they feel that unbroken pause, charged with certainty, they will move mountains to stay inside your orbit. You don't ask for the whale frame, you become it. So how do you own the frame? Those who wish to be obeyed must know how to command. That's Machiavelli, and it opens the final law. He takes us to Mayfair, London. A dinner where nobody checks the bill because nobody needs to. 7 people at the table, private equity, royal accents, bespoke suits, one hedge fund CEO whose name never appears in headlines but moved markets with a whisper. He was the only outsider. No pitch, no posturing, just an unspoken rule. Speak only when you've got something impossible to ignore. The kingmaker leans forward and asks Table a question. If you lost everything tomorrow, what's the first call you'd make? One man said, my lawyer. The other, my banker. Third said, my wife. Wrong answers, all of them. But then he pointed at me. I let the moment hang. I said, I wouldn't make a call if I lost everything. Silence would do the work. I'd watch who noticed the absence. The right hand always reaches in. I don't reach, I draw. He smiled. 2 taps of his ring on the table. That's it. That's the game. Frame stops being something you do and something you are. Your name enters the room before you do. Your silence outranks their credentials. Your presence bends gravity without effort. I've watched this play out everywhere. Marrakech, where I set down a pen and said, it's fine, I already have enough. And the seller dropped his price by half. Tokyo, where I poured tea instead of countering, and the CEO reversed his position without another word. Singapore, where I turned a rejection letter blank side up and pushed it back across the table, and they reopened negotiations. Pattern is always the same. Power doesn't hurry to fill the air. It lingers. It lets the noise exhaust itself. Then it drops a single word that lands like iron. Most people leak energy. They overshare, overexplain, overcompensate. Frame doesn't seek approval. It demands recognition. The paradox is this. The less you need the outcome, the more likely it arrives. That isn't aloofness. It's alignment. Here's what frame actually is. It's never acted. It's absorbed. Before you speak, they already feel it. Silence becomes gravity. Stillness pulls more than any strategy. 5 laws crystallize this. First, need nothing. Whales, lovers, investors all lean toward the one who signals no need. Second, make them wait. Silence is wait. Third, exit early. Presence compounds when paired with scarcity. Fourth, let mystery work. Power leaks the moment it's explained. And fifth, radiate climate, not performance. Frame is not a move. It's the air they breathe when you're near. One day you'll find yourself at a threshold, a locked door, a guarded gate, and you'll walk through without a word. That's owning the frame. Another of his quotes is, order is not pressure imposed from without, but equilibrium from within. There's a moment that exists beyond language. Someone enters a room, and without a word being spoken, the air itself seems to shift. The room finds its center. Before thought, before pitch, before any polished resume, the body knows. This person doesn't orbit. They are the axis. He witnessed this in a Venetian palazzo at midnight where crystal glasses went silent mid-ring as if holding their breath. He saw it in Zurich where 2,000 eyes turned not from announcement but from pure instinct. No explanation needed. Everybody simply felt it. This is frame. And it's not what most people think it is. It's not confidence backed from a self-help book. It's not memorized power phrases or strategic posturing. It's something deeper, primal, undeniable presence that bends gravity around itself. The tragedy of the unframed is that they spend their entire lives trying to win the room, never realizing that the framed one is the room. I spent years studying how this works, he said, not theoretically, but viscerally. I replayed moments when I lost it, dissected them frame by frame, and rebuilt myself from the ground up. These 10 laws are techniques I invented. They are the living architecture of human psychology weaponized into presence. 1. The law of non-neediness. Need leaks. The higher value the person across from you, the faster they smell it. Power doesn't move toward hunger, but when you're so complete that you truly don't need the outcome, that detachment becomes magnetic. 2. The law of signal. Before words, there's transmission, the tempo of your walk, the precision of your gaze, your stillness. Judgments form in 2 seconds and outperform hours of analysis. 3. The law of cold command. The first 5 seconds sets the frame. Warm, apologetic, openers broadcast submission. Surgical authority doesn't ask permission, it begins. 4. The law of subtext. People listen beneath words. A whisper with aligned subtext carries more weight than shouting with fractured intent. The next group of laws includes frame collision, qualification, scarcity, psychological sequence, frame recovery, and embodied frame. Each one builds on the last. They're not separate tactics. They're a unified architecture of power. The final stage is cellular. Frame no longer holds you. You no longer hold it. Your presence precedes you. People step into your conversations before you speak. The room doesn't ask what you'll do. It waits because you're there. He felt it in Paris. He saw it again in Zurich, Singapore, Berlin, Madrid. And you'll feel it too. Because once frame burns through your bones, you don't follow the laws anymore. You are the law. In the last chapter of his book, he says it's the one that changes everything because it reveals there was nothing to change at all. The entire book has been about one thing, the shift from trying to be impressive to becoming inevitable. And it all comes down to a single realization that took him years to understand. He says, I learned it the hard way. I walked into rooms armed with proof, over-explaining, chasing validation, thinking my words would protect me. Every single time the room could smell it. Need is never invisible. It leaks through tone, pace, and eyes that seek instead of assess. He remembers a dinner in Lisbon, a long table of black marble where a woman sat like a sovereign disguised as a guest. She wasn't the most beautiful in the room, but she was the most magnetic. Why? Because she didn't try to be. When I attempted charm and wit, her pupils never dilated. I had flinched. I had auditioned. He saw it again in a Mercer elevator with a legendary financier who said nothing. In his silence was an entire hierarchy. Then there was a $3 million boardroom. The slides were flawless, the numbers surgical. 5 minutes in, the CEO stared out the window. We had started selling, justifying, filling silence with reasons instead of letting it breathe. Different cities, different players, same route. The hunger to be chosen, to be liked, to be seen. Then something shifted. It doesn't arrive as lightning, it creeps. It rewires you slowly until one day you walk into a room. You're not thinking about whether they'll see you. You're watching to see if they can even recognize what they're looking at. Most can't, and it no longer wounds you. Because here's the final law. The moment you stop needing the room to validate you, the room reorients itself around you. Voices lower, questions slow. The limbic brain speaks no language. It reads tempo, stillness, detachment, certainty, not words, the signal underneath. History teaches this. Marcus Aurelius spoke little in court. Cleopatra held empires without raising her voice. Musashi cut down opponents with the pace of a man who knew the battle was already his. Frame didn't just make us better closers, it saved us from chasing what never respected us, from rooms we didn't belong in. So here's the final pivot. You don't need a stronger close. You need a stronger center. You don't need a better script. You need better stillness. The hesitation before you speak is heavier than the words you speak. Frame is not what you do. Frame is who you've become. And when you master it, you realize the crown was never theirs to give. You were the throne all along. It's quite a book. So my takeaway is this. Frame is not a personality trait. It isn't rank or title. Justin and Jonny are clear on this. You can't fake it, but you can build it. I've seen the difference it makes when a senior leader walks into a high-stakes room and holds the frame versus handing it away in the first 2 minutes. The programs that slip, the deals that stall, the partnerships that never close, frame is usually somewhere in that story. You can also create a writing style guide for the frame and apply all of this to your writing. It's very effective, and it points out when your initial approach differs from one that's framed according to these unspoken laws of power, status, and influence. Pick up a copy of The Frame, The Unspoken Laws of Power, Status, and Influence by Justin Michael and Jonny Staker. Then pay attention to what happens in your posts and in the next room you walk into. Everything we covered today lives inside a larger pattern I've been tracking across medtech programs for 30 years. Timelines that slip, AI that adds risk instead of reducing it, products built without the architecture to support what's coming next. The gap between where most teams operate and what the next decade requires is real. I find it for a living. If you want to close that gap, the resources are at InnoGuide.net. systems thinking, AI integration without added regulatory risk, embedded machine learning readiness built from 66 delivered medical products, not theory. And if you're a medtech leader who wants to work through these problems with peers who are inside the same pressure, MedX is where that happens, monthly. Join button is on my LinkedIn page. That's where to find me. I want to thank Steve McIntyre for producing this, and I really want to thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next time. That's a wrap.